Hey everybody, Jem Schofield here, and welcome to the 4K for 10K camera series. If you have not yet done so, please check out the overview video where I talk about the criteria for the 6 candidate cameras that we are featuring. I also want to mention that this series is not about doing a direct comparison between the cameras. It is not a video-based user manual for each of the cameras, nor in-depth reviews of the cameras that are featured. The whole purpose of this series is to help you figure out which camera or cameras that we are covering might be right for your productions. A camera series would not be complete without some test footage. So we decided that we were going to record to each of these cameras internally at their highest resolution and at the best formats and codecs that they could record to internally. In this particular video, we're talking about the Panasonic AU-EVA1, commonly referred to as the EVA1. So let's get started. Let's talk about what you get when you purchase the EVA1. We have the camera body itself, which is incredibly small and compact. In fact, along with the FS5 II, those are the 2 smallest camera bodies in the series. It also has this hand grip, which is a lot more than a hand grip in terms of its capabilities to access menus and for camera control. We have a top handle here, which has 1/4, 20, and 3/8 taps. It has 2 cold shoes, which is fantastic, and it also has a shock mount, and then we have the removable LCD screen. Now, one big note about this camera, which I should go over right now at the get-go, is there is no electronic viewfinder that is built into or a part of this camera system, and Panasonic does not make an electronic viewfinder as an additional accessory that you can add to the camera at this time. So if you want an EVF and that is part of the way that you're used to shooting, you will have to source a third-party solution for that and for this camera. We'll also talk more about this LCD screen and the fact that you may want to consider getting a third-party EVF or LCD screen, especially if you're shooting outdoors a lot with this camera system. Additionally, you get this dual battery charger and a single battery. You'll definitely want to get 1 or 2 additional batteries for the camera system. Please note that while it's great that you get a dual charger with this, that the included power supply system here will either charge your batteries or it will power your camera system. It will not do both. So if you do need to charge batteries while you're powering the EVA1 off of mains, then you will want to get an additional power brick and power supply for your dual charger. That's an easy thing to source though, so not a big deal. So that's basically what you're getting with the camera system when you purchase it. I also want to go over a few other things in terms of the camera body and usability, especially from a small to no crew perspective. Now, the lens mount for the EVA1 is a Canon EF mount, and also talk a little bit about the sensor inside of this camera, which is a Super 35mm base sensor. It is also unique in the sense that it is a 5.7K resolution sensor. So it is the highest resolution sensor of all of the cameras in this series. I don't like leaving a body cap off, so I'm going to lens this. We'll just stick a lens onto the camera itself. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the left side of the camera body. And really, again, the focus is taking a look at this from the standpoint of small to no crew production. We're taking a look at this from the viewpoint of a single operator and sort of using this camera by themselves. And they've done a really nice job with the EVA1 in terms of the layout here and what you can access. Now, coming over to the left side of the camera here, we have audio controls, and this gives us quick and easy access to our audio levels for channel 1 and channel 2, and also switching between automatic gain control and manual control. And that, of course, is controlling the audio that is coming in on the back rear of the camera for our XLR inputs 1 and 2. Now, if we continue to rotate the camera over here, we can take a look at this hand grip, which is incredibly versatile. In fact, if you use your thumb here, you can depress this and you can quickly and easily adjust this hand grip to the position that's comfortable to you for shooting. We additionally over here have quick and easy access to our menu system for the camera, start, stop, record. And on the top right here, we have an assignable button, there is actually another assignable button on the inside of this hand grip. And we also have this dial here, which lets us navigate our menu system and also make selections. So incredibly versatile overall. Going back to the back of the camera system, a couple of things to talk about here, and this has to do with our ports. One of the very unique features of the EVA1 is this SDI port. We can actually push a 5.7K raw signal directly out of the camera system to an external recorder. And then down here, also impressive for a camera of this price, we have timecode in and out, which is really essential when you are doing multicam production, especially for reality, documentary, and things like that. We also have our card slots here, and these take SD cards, and you should be using at least V60, but ideally V90 cards in your camera system to take advantage of the best quality recording that you can internally. And there is also an HDMI 2.0 port on the camera for external monitoring and recording. Now we're going to go back over here to the left side of the camera body and take a look at some other key features, especially from a single operator standpoint. And we'll see here that we have quick and easy access. Let me go ahead and turn the camera on so we can take a look at this, to our iris control of our camera. And what's really nice here is if you depress that, it will go to an auto iris, depress it again, and you can manually change the iris for your lens. ND filter, 2, 4, and 6 stops of ND. And then also this little switch down here on the bottom left, which allows you to switch between changing your white balance, a user-defined function. By default, that's your levels in terms of audio levels, but it could be something like frame rates or something else. And then also our ISO and gain, and that switch is directly connected to this dial right here when you are making those changes to those functions. Additionally, we have lots and lots of assignable buttons here, all with their own default assignable function, but you can go into the menu system and change those. We have an electronic image stabilizer, and if I just press that, you'll see that we punch into our image a little bit. This is a great function in situations where you are using lenses, maybe prime lenses that do not have in-camera stabilization and you're going handheld. Though I do find that you will get better results overall if you're using the stabilizer that is part of a lens, if that's available to you. I do also want to mention the communication between the EF lens system and also what you're seeing on the screen. And when we're taking our focal length on this particular camera and we're changing our focal length using a compatible lens, we will in fact see that change show up on the screen itself. Additionally, waveform monitor, key exposure tool that I use in production all of the time, so you can toggle that on and off. And then my absolute favorite function, probably in terms of what I can access here with the camera, which is this home button. And as soon as we press that, we get this display that comes up with quick and easy access to things like our frame rates, in terms of our color settings and gamma settings, shutter, ISO or gain, audio controls. In fact, this is a great place to access additional audio controls without having to go deep into the menu system. And then, of course, our white balance settings. So this is really something that allows you to quickly and easily, with the touchscreen, access all of these functions. But it's not the only way that you can use the home feature on the EVA1. In fact, once home is up, you can actually use that dial that's next to that switch that we looked at earlier on, and you can cycle through it. Alternatively, you can go over to the hand grip and you can use that dial and select things and make changes to everything that's accessible through the home feature of the camera system. So really, really great functionality overall in terms of what you can do. So now that we've taken a look at home, what we're going to do is dive right into the EVA1 menu system and take a look at some of the key functions and parameters when using the camera system. We can just go ahead and press the menu button, and then we can navigate that 3 different ways. We can use this dial here to navigate and select. We can use the dial on the hand grip to navigate and select our menu items, and we can also use the touch screen on the actual camera itself. So before I jump into system settings, I do want to recommend that you spend some time with the EVA1's menu system. Sometimes there's a little bit of a learning process as a camera operator to understand where things are in a particular camera's menu system and how to get to them. And while we have things like home to get to our key features, we will have to go into the menu system to get to certain functions. So we're going to jump into system settings here, and there's a lot of options inside of here in terms of what you can do. So we're going to go into system mode, and under here we have frequency, which generally we would access as our frames per second in the home button, or we would assign that, but you can access that here. We have our sensor mode, so how are we using that sensor on the camera system? Standardly, we would use the full 5.7K sensor in Super 35, but if you were trying to do things like access higher frame rates and wanted to do that at lower resolution, you could do that here. And you can see that there are other options in here, but please refer to your user manual for when you might use those. And then main pixel, what resolution are we recording to internally to those SD cards? So UHD 4K, DCI 4K or lower resolutions, and then your main codec. What's the codec that you're using to record? Right now, we have it set to 422 long GOP 150 megabits per second, and while that's creating a smaller file size, when we get into post, our NLEs have to work a lot harder, our CPUs, when we're using long GOP. I tend to favor a 422 all intra 400 megabits per second codec, and that's still a pretty small footprint. This is a 10-bit recording and is a pretty nice fat file in terms of being able to work with it in post-production. So we'll exit out of there. We'll take a look at color settings, and this is also important and something you can access through home. This is really where we choose our gamuts and also our gammas, and there are some built-in looks that you have here, but when we're using V-Log, one of the things that I actually like about this camera is that when you switch to V-Log, as opposed to, let's say, going Sdi Out using V709, V-Log is actually setting two things. It is setting our log gamma, meaning our dynamic range, and giving us the biggest dynamic range that we can record using the sensor on this camera system. But it's also wide gamut, so we're getting both of those. So if you're used to using a camera system, let's say like the Arri Alexa, which has log C, that is doing a similar thing. V-Log is giving us the ability to record that full dynamic range in terms of our gamma and also our full color gamut. And then the last thing I want to show you in system settings is user switches, and this is where we go in and we take each of these user buttons and also that user toggle and choose a different function. We'll step out of that, and now we're going to go into camera settings. And this again is where you really need to learn your menu system. You may be seeing FPS for frames per second and thinking that that is where you're going to choose your standard frame rate for recording. The same way we would do that here under home. But in actual fact, when we go into camera settings and we choose frames per second, this is where we are choosing our variable frame rates for our recording. So we can go in there and actually change what that value is in terms of our recording frame rate, which will be determined based on how our sensor mode and our resolution is set up. And very importantly, our exposure index options. Now, the EVA1 is unique to all of the cameras in our series in that it has two base ISO settings, and you should definitely refer to the user manual in terms of, from an engineering standpoint, how this works. But most camera systems have a base ISO, and then you'll gain that up or down based on that ISO setting. In the EVA1, we have two base ISOs. We have 800 and we have 2500. And what we can do here is we can leave those as just native only, which means that we just switch between those two base ISOs, and then we use things like ND and our lighting and everything else to change exposure. But we can also go in here and we can change that, and if we change it to 800 base, then what we can do is we can go in and we can change our ISO based on that base. So we can go from 200 all the way up to 2000 ISO when we're set to our 800 base. If we change our base to 2500 in our settings here for ISO select, we can go in and we can change that from a 1000 ISO all the way up to 25,600. So a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can do in terms of your ISO with this camera system. And then under here, we also have other options like the ability to turn on or off the IR recording option in the camera system, which is a pretty unique feature. And some of these menus do scroll down. So for instance, under camera settings, this is where we access our auto black balance functionality. We'll exit out of there. Now we're going to go down to record settings. And under here, this is where you format your cards, but also we can do things like simultaneous recording. So we're recording the same data to both cards. For me, in small to no crew production environments, this is huge. When a camera has this functionality, it makes a huge difference to me because there's generally, in a lot of our shooting scenarios, not a person who's dedicated to data wrangling. If they're going to do that, they're going to do that halfway through the day or at the end of the day. And so being able to record the same data to two cards simultaneously is very important to me in a lot of situations. The last thing we're going to take a look at has to do with both output settings and system settings. So I'm going to go into output settings and we're going to take a look at Sdi Out. And when we go into there, basically what we're doing is we're saying what's being pushed out of that SDI terminal. So let's say out format here, and I want to push DCI 4K, and I've turned that on. Well, that's what's going to go out in terms of my signal. Now, if I exit out of here and I go up to system settings, there's one other setting that I haven't talked about here, which is under system mode, and that's this, which is SDI RAW. And this is where we access that full 5.7K RAW output from the camera system. So we'll go into SDI RAW. We can choose what mode we're going to do that in. In my case, I'm going to just do the full S35 5.7K. And then it's going to basically reboot the camera system to make sure that that is being pushed out of this terminal. And then if I now go back over here to output settings, I just want to show you under Sdi Out that everything has been grayed out because now we are overriding that for this terminal and pushing that raw 5.7K image over that terminal. So while this is not an internal recording function of the EVA1, it is a very cool and unique feature of the camera system. A lot of us have had workflows and maybe still have workflows where we're shooting in 4K on our camera systems, either DCI 4K or UHD 4K, and then our timelines are set to 1080, 1920 by 1080, or maybe DCI 2K. And so we're used to reframing shots, we're used to punching in, cropping in on our shots. And if we want that functionality now in a 4K workflow, this can give it to us. If we're using an external recording solution, we can take that raw 5.7K signal. And in this case, what we're doing is we're hooking it up to an Atomos Shogun Inferno. And you can see here that we have a number of options in terms of recording that. But what we really want to be able to do is record that full 5.7K image. We can do that with this recording solution, and we can even do that in ProRes RAW. Now we can take that 5.7K recording and we can go ahead and reframe, crop, and punch into those images even in a 4K workflow. Now this is not something new. There are camera systems on the market, but they all cost more than $10,000 US. So this is giving us a very unique feature set inside of the EVA1 in terms of what we can do with external recording. So now it's time for us to take a look at the footage with the EVA1 in terms of our internal recording at our highest resolution and highest quality recording settings. So for our internal recording, we have the camera set to Super 35 5.7K for our sensor mode. Main pixel is set to DCI 4K at 4096 by 2160. And then for our main codec, we are recording 10-bit 422 all intra at 400 megabits per second. So let's go ahead and take a look at that footage. Here are our three shooting scenarios that we are going to be showing you. And they are an interior low light example, an exterior example, and also a mixed lighting example. So our low light test was really, again, to do something where we were shooting in low light and pushing the sensor a little bit. just a large soft key source. We had a little bit of light in the background. We wanted to make sure that there was some color in that image so that you could see how it reacts to that, but also to make sure that we had dynamic range in the frame. For our exterior, we wanted to simulate as close as we could bright daylight, but with high dynamic range throughout the image. We're not using any bounce cards. There's no negative fill. We're just using the light that is available to us in that space. And then for this scenario, we really wanted to make sure that we were kind of mimicking a typical situation where you might have some mixed lighting. We're using lots of practicals. There's obviously daylight coming into the space. And we also have a couple of fixtures that are playing here. The main one is our key light for our main talent in the foreground. And then there's a small light down there in the back left of the frame, which is just basically throwing a little bit of a pool of light into that shadowy area to lift it a little bit. And again, the goal was to show you and give you something with some real dynamic range to play with in the image. Here are our settings for the camera system for our low light test. Now we're taking a look at that footage without any information up on the screen. Do remember though, if you're watching it as part of this video, that this is heavily compressed, and we urge you to download the original files to see what this image actually has in it in terms of information. And now we're taking a look at that same footage, but what we've done is just applied a Rec. 709 LUT for you to take a look at it for example. When we decided to put a Rec. 709 LUT up on here, it wasn't to show a color grading example. It was more to just give you a sense of what you might be looking at if you were applying a viewing LUT in production. Now we jump to our exterior bright light setup with the EVA1, and here's our camera settings for that scenario. Now we see that same frame without any information up on the screen, so you can get a sense of what it looks like. But again, remember, this is a compressed version if you're watching this video. And now we're taking a look at that same footage with a Rec. 709 LUT applied, just to give you a sense of what it might look like if you had a viewing LUT up on a screen while you're in production. Here are our settings for our mixed lighting scenario with the EVA1. Here we are taking a look at that frame without any information up on the screen, so you can see what the frame was that we were capturing. And here, just for reference, is that same footage with a Rec. 709 LUT applied. So the goal here, regardless of low light, exterior, or sort of a mixed lighting situation, was to show you a lot of dynamic range within each of these images. So we were exposing for middle gray to where we should have for each of those cameras, and that allowed us to make sure that we had proper exposure for you to start with your images. So there you have it. That is the AU-EVA1 from Panasonic, and hopefully this video gave you a better sense of what this camera is and also where it might fit into your small to no crew productions. As I've said before, there is no perfect camera system, and you will find that each one of these cameras may be better suited for certain types of productions and what you are doing. Now, I do recommend that you download the sample footage from this and all of the videos so you can see what you're getting in terms of the internal recording at the highest resolution and quality that that particular camera is capable of giving you. And also, please check out the other videos in the series. Thanks for watching.